I never thought this would happen to me. I was always the type of person who liked to follow the rules, get good grades, keep my head down, and not draw too much attention to myself. I had a few friends, but mostly I kept to myself. That was until I met him. His name was Ryan. He was a tutor, hired by my parents to help me catch up on some of the subjects I was struggling with. He was older than me, probably in his late 20s, and he had that air of confidence about him that made him impossible to ignore. At first, I thought it would just be a few tutoring sessions, nothing more. But I was wrong. So wrong. The first time I saw him, I was immediately struck by how easygoing he was. Unlike the teachers at school who were uptight and serious, Ryan had this relaxed, almost laid-back way of interacting with people. He had a smile that was both kind and a little mischievous, and a voice that made every word sound like it was carefully measured, like he knew the power behind it. I wasn't exactly sure how to react to him at first. We didn't talk much at first. He was professional. I was focused on the work. But there was this tension that neither of us acknowledged, a strange undercurrent of something more that I couldn't explain. I found myself looking at him when I wasn't supposed to, and each time our eyes met, my heart would race, as if I was trying to hold on to something I knew I couldn't have. It started innocently enough. He would come over a few times a week, and we would go over the material, math problems, essays, anything that needed work. But it didn't take long before I started noticing more about him. His jawline, the way his hair fell just perfectly in place, the way he moved, everything about him seemed deliberate, yet effortless. His presence made me feel nervous, even though he was always calm and collected. One afternoon, after we finished a session on calculus, I found myself lingering. The lesson was over, but I didn't want him to leave just yet. Ryan was gathering his things, preparing to leave, but something in me made me stop him. "Hey, Ryan," I said, my voice shaky. He looked up at me, his eyes meeting mine, his face softening. "Yeah?" I hesitated, unsure of what to say. I think I understand it now. The work. I felt ridiculous saying it, as if I was just trying to find a reason for him to stay longer. "That's great," he said, smiling warmly at me. "I knew you would get it." I stood there, staring at him, and I didn't know what to do with the feeling that had started growing inside me. It was more than gratitude. It was something deeper, something dangerous. He was older, he was my tutor, and it was wrong. But I couldn't stop myself. "Well, thanks for the help," I managed to say, my voice almost a whisper. He nodded, and then, as if sensing the tension, he gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Anytime. See you next session." I nodded, watching him leave, but my mind stayed with him, lingering on his voice, his smile, and that strange feeling I couldn't shake. I thought about it all night. I kept playing the moment over in my mind, trying to figure out what had happened. Had he felt it too? That tension? Or was it all just in my head? The next few days passed in a blur of tutoring sessions, schoolwork, and late-night thoughts that I didn't know how to control. Every time Ryan came over, it was like the air in the room thickened, the silence between us filled with words neither of us dared to say. He would help me with homework, but sometimes I would catch him glancing at me in a way that made my heart race. Then it happened. It was a late session one evening. The house was quiet, my parents out of town for a business trip, leaving me alone with Ryan. I could feel the electricity between us the moment he walked into the living room. It was different tonight. He was standing closer to me, his arm brushing mine as we sat at the table. I could barely concentrate on the homework in front of me. My mind kept drifting to him. And then, when I least expected it, Ryan turned to me. His voice was lower than usual. "Clara," he said softly, "you've been working so hard lately. I think you deserve a break." I blinked, confused. "A break? From what?" "From the stress," he replied, his gaze not leaving mine. "You've been pushing yourself, and sometimes you need to let go. To relax." His words sent a shiver through me, and I couldn't help but feel drawn to him. The air between us thickened, the space between us closing slowly, but deliberately. I started, but my voice faltered. I didn't know what to say. This wasn't supposed to happen. It was wrong. I shouldn't be feeling this way about my tutor. I shouldn't even be thinking about him this way. But there it was. The attraction, undeniable and raw. He reached out, almost as if he was testing the waters, and gently cupped my chin. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. His touch was gentle, yet it made everything inside me feel on fire. I couldn't breathe. "I've noticed how you look at me," he whispered, his voice hushed, like he was afraid to speak too loudly. And I can't stop thinking about it. Before I could respond, his lips were on mine. It was slow, tentative at first, but then it deepened, the kiss becoming more urgent. My heart raced in my chest, and I found myself responding to him, despite everything inside me screaming that I should pull away, that I should stop. But I didn't. I let the kiss continue. I let myself fall into it, forgetting everything else. The tutor-student line, the consequences, the reality. All I could think about was him, and how it felt to be wanted, to be kissed by someone like him. The kiss lasted longer than I ever imagined it could. It was as if the world around us had ceased to exist. In that moment, there was only Ryan and me. His lips were gentle at first, exploring mine with tentative strokes, but soon the kiss grew deeper, hungrier. My body responded before I could even process what was happening, my hands instinctively reaching for him, pulling him closer. I knew I should stop. I knew it was wrong, that this was crossing a line we couldn't come back from. He was my tutor, my older mentor, someone I had trusted and respected. But as his hand slid to my waist and I felt his warmth against me, all my thoughts about right and wrong seemed to vanish. In that moment, all I could think about was how badly I wanted this. I broke the kiss, pulling back just slightly to catch my breath. My heart was racing, my thoughts were clouded with desire, and I could feel the heat of my cheeks, flushed with embarrassment and excitement. "Ryan," I whispered, my voice shaking. This isn't right." Ryan didn't say anything at first. He just looked at me, his expression serious, his eyes dark with desire. There was no denial in his gaze, no hesitation. He wasn't the one pulling away. "I know," he said, his voice low and filled with tension. "But sometimes, Clara, sometimes you can't control what you feel." I was silent for a moment, my mind racing as I tried to make sense of everything. How had we gotten here? How had a simple tutoring session turned into this? My rational mind screamed at me to stop, to push him away, but my body refused to listen. Ryan leaned in again, this time slower, more deliberate, giving me a chance to stop him if I wanted to. But I didn't. I didn't want to. Instead, I closed my eyes and let him kiss me again, feeling every inch of him against me. I kissed him back with a hunger I didn't know I had, pulling him closer, my hands moving to his chest, feeling the heat of his body through his shirt. The kiss deepened, and this time, there was no hesitation. I could feel his hands move to the back of my neck, threading through my hair, pulling me closer still. The world outside the room seemed to fade away. Nothing else mattered but the feeling of his lips, his touch, his presence. It was as if we were two magnets, drawn together despite every reason to resist. But as the kiss grew more passionate, a small voice in the back of my mind kept whispering that this wasn't supposed to happen. That I was making a mistake. But the need, the desire, was overpowering. Ryan pulled back again, his breathing heavy, his eyes full of longing. "Clara," he whispered, his voice rough, "are you sure?" I hesitated, my heart pounding in my chest. The truth was, I wasn't sure. I had always been the type of person who followed the rules, who did the right thing. But in that moment, all I could think about was the way Ryan made me feel alive, wanted, desired in a way I'd never experienced before. I don't know," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "But I can't stop thinking about you." Ryan's expression softened, and he moved to kiss me again, more tenderly this time. The kiss was slower, more intimate, as if he was savoring the moment just as much as I was. And in that moment, I knew there was no turning back. We didn't speak again for a while. We didn't need to. Our bodies spoke for us, and everything else faded into the background. There was no longer any distinction between tutor and student, no longer any distinction between what was right and wrong. There was just us. The night stretched on, and by the time the session ended, I felt like I had crossed a line I couldn't uncross. I knew this wasn't the end of it. This wasn't just a one-time thing. There was a part of me that wanted to tell myself I could walk away, that this could just be a fleeting moment. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. I knew I had opened a door, and there was no way to close it. The next day, everything felt different. Ryan came back for another session, but there was an awkwardness between us. We didn't talk about what happened the night before. It hung in the air unsaid, both of us pretending it didn't matter when we both knew it did. The sessions went on, but they were no longer the same. Each time he came over, I could feel the tension between us. Every glance, every touch seemed to carry the weight of what we had done. It was as if we were both walking on a tightrope, afraid to fall off but not knowing how to stop. One day, as I was finishing some homework, Ryan leaned in close, his voice barely above a whisper. "Clara," he said, his hand resting on the table next to mine, "I can't keep pretending like this is nothing. I feel something for you. I think you feel it too." I looked up at him, my heart in my throat. "What are we doing, Ryan? This can't happen. It's too much." But he just shook his head. "I don't care about the rules anymore. I care about you." The truth was, I cared about him too. But I couldn't ignore the fact that we were crossing boundaries that should never have been crossed. We were risking everything, our futures, our reputations, our integrity. "Ryan," I said, my voice breaking, "we can't keep doing this." He looked at me, his face full of emotion, and then sighed. "I know. But I can't just forget what we've shared." I stood up, taking a step back from him. "We have to. It's the only way." Ryan didn't move. He just watched me, his expression filled with regret and understanding. And in that moment, I knew we couldn't go back. We had both crossed the line, and we had to live with the consequences.